Hey guys, tonight we wander into the crowded, smoky maze of a medieval city, where the streets glisten with puddles you absolutely do not want to identify too closely. Chimneys cough thin streams of soot into the gray air, and hungry families somehow stretch almost nothing into enough to survive one more day. You shuffle between leaning timber houses while carts rattle past, dogs bark at absolutely nothing, and somebody nearby is arguing passionately over a cabbage that looks like it already surrendered several winters ago. If you're imagining yourself thriving here with confidence and rugged determination, I should gently warn you that you probably won't survive this. Mostly because your modern standards for comfort collapse roughly 3 minutes after the smell hits you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me your location and local time in the comments. Somewhere in the world it is midnight, somewhere dawn, and somewhere else somebody is probably listening to this while pretending to work. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You enter the city before sunrise, because poor families rarely waste daylight. Gates creak open slowly, and people already move through narrow streets carrying baskets, buckets, bundles of wood, or simply the stubborn determination required to survive another exhausting week. Around you, buildings lean at strange angles as though tired of standing upright. Timber frames bulge outward above the lanes, upper floors almost reaching toward one another like neighbors exchanging secrets overhead. You notice quickly that space itself feels expensive here. Rich merchants may enjoy stone houses with several rooms, but poor families often fit themselves into cramped corners tucked above workshops, behind market stalls, or pressed inside shared housing where walls seem thinner than patience. Sometimes entire families sleep together in one room, sharing heat because cold cares very little about personal boundaries. And yes, before your modern brain objects, there is almost no privacy. A cough from one corner, snoring from another, somebody muttering in sleep, somebody else stepping over you because dawn means work. Comfort becomes negotiable. You drift through a street where smells gather in layers. Bread baking somewhere nearby competes bravely against fish, smoke, sweat, damp straw, animal waste, and whatever mystery liquid just traveled past your boots with suspicious enthusiasm. Medieval cities are crowded because walls surround them for protection, meaning people squeeze together in astonishing numbers. A mainstream historical fact quietly settles beside you here. Many medieval cities depended on defensive walls, and limited space inside meant overcrowding became a constant problem for poorer residents. Streets narrowed, houses climbed upward, and families learned to compress life itself into tiny spaces. You pause near a market square where people already argue over scraps of business. Nobody wastes energy pretending life is fair. A woman bargains fiercely for onions. A boy runs messages for pennies. Someone repairs shoes beside a puddle while muttering curses directed equally at weather and customers. Poor families survive partly through flexibility. One week, a father unloads carts. Another week, he repairs tools. Another week, he simply searches for work while pretending not to panic. Mothers barter old cloth for soup ingredients. Grandparents watch children. Older siblings carry goods, scrub floors, or help market sellers before their backs are truly old enough for the work. You imagine yourself arriving with modern confidence. "Excuse me?" you ask politely. "Where can I charge my phone?" The city stares back in medieval silence. Then somebody hands you a bucket? Congratulations, you work now. You wander deeper into twisting alleys where homes crowd together so tightly that daylight struggles to visit. A poor family lives upstairs above a workshop. Another rents half a room shared with cousins. Some sleep on straw pallets spread across floors. Blankets exist technically, though blanket occasionally means something only slightly softer than disappointment. Yet survival has rhythms. The baker saves stale bread that poorer customers buy cheaper. Soup stretches across days. Fires become shared resources. People trade labor instead of coins. You help mend boots and receive leftovers. You sweep floors and earn a crust of bread. Wealth feels distant, but endurance grows familiar. Historians still argue whether medieval urban poverty was quite as hopeless as older stories suggest, or whether strong neighborhood networks softened daily hardship more than we often imagine. Some evidence suggests crowded city communities developed quiet systems of mutual support. By the time the city fully wakes, you begin to understand that surviving poverty here depends less on comfort and more on learning how astonishingly little comfort people can tolerate without openly complaining about it. Morning light slips weakly through crooked streets, catches on damp walls, and finally guides you toward the sort of home many poor families call ordinary. Ordinary in this case means very small. You duck beneath a low doorway and immediately regret standing upright. The ceiling beams seem personally offended by tall people. Smoke hangs in the air with the determination of an unwelcome guest, and the room itself feels less like architecture and more like an agreement between exhaustion and necessity. One room, sometimes only one. A space for sleeping, cooking, eating, mending, arguing, coughing, praying, storing scraps, and occasionally wondering where exactly your life went wrong. You glance around, quietly calculating where the bedroom might be. There is no bedroom. That corner with straw? Sleeping area? That bench near the wall? Sleeping area? That sack near the fire? Also suspiciously close to becoming a sleeping area. Privacy has officially packed its belongings and moved several centuries away. Poor families in medieval cities often live packed tightly into rented rooms or subdivided housing. A mainstream historical fact settles softly here beside the smoke. In many European cities, poorer laborers and servants commonly rented cramped spaces in crowded tenements or shared buildings because land and construction inside city walls remained expensive and limited. Sometimes multiple unrelated people occupied spaces that modern visitors might generously classify as storage closets. You imagine explaining personal space. Actually, you say, I need boundaries. The room stares at you. Then somebody hands you a bucket again. You still work here, apparently. The family settles into its rhythm around you. Parents rise early. Children stir beneath blankets thin enough to count as hopeful suggestions rather than proper bedding. Grandparents, if present, occupy whichever patch of warmth their joints negotiated overnight. The fire matters. Everything circles around heat. Without warmth, winter creeps into bones. Food spoils faster. Fingers stiffen. Sleep vanishes. And misery grows ambitious. The family gathers near a small hearth where cooking happens, gossip happens, and arguments happen with exhausting reliability. Smoke stains beams overhead because chimneys, when available, do not always cooperate. Some poorer homes vent smoke imperfectly, meaning breathing indoors occasionally resembles participating in a very disappointing weather event. You sit near the warmth and notice how objects serve several lives at once. A stool becomes seating, storage, and sometimes a stepladder. Clothing doubles as blankets. Old sacks become pillows if optimism survives long enough. Beds, meanwhile, deserve discussion. Or perhaps negotiation. A proper bed costs money. Poorer households often sleep on straw mattresses, rough pallets, wool blankets when fortune smiles, or layered cloth spread over wood. Families frequently sleep close together because warmth matters more than elegance. You turn sideways at night simply because somebody's elbow occupies your future. And then there are roommates you absolutely did not invite. Fleas, possibly lice. Occasionally mice with suspicious confidence. You lie awake imagining a medieval estate agent cheerfully describing the place. Cozy urban property, rustic atmosphere, complimentary wildlife. Wonderful. A quirky little historical tidbit slips quietly into the room beside you. Some households reportedly believed certain herbs tucked into bedding or scattered around sleeping areas discouraged insects or bad smells. Lavender, wormwood, rosemary, mint, small fragrant attempts to convince both pests and despair to leave politely. Whether they worked consistently remains another matter entirely, but medieval people absolutely experimented with survival hacks long before anybody invented scented candles pretending to smell like forests. The family talks softly while evening approaches. A mother repairs torn sleeves near firelight. A father counts wages that somehow already feel smaller than expected. Children whisper stories under blankets. And because one room means one room, nobody escapes anybody else. You hear arguments? Every argument? Money? Chores? Missing bread? Who forgot water? Who accidentally burned supper? Why Cousin Thomas absolutely cannot stay another week, despite Cousin Thomas already removing his shoes? You also hear tenderness. A tired parent humming softly. Somebody adjusting a blanket over sleeping children. a neighbor knocking quietly to share soup because illness visited next door. Historians still argue whether crowded medieval living strengthened emotional bonds through constant shared experience or aid.
Section 3. Morning arrives less like a graceful sunrise and more like an argument you lose against noise. Before your eyes fully open, somebody is already moving around the room. A pot scrapes softly. Someone coughs into the smoky air. Outside, wheels rattle over uneven streets with all the gentleness of medieval alarm clocks, which, to be fair, mostly consist of neighbors shouting and chickens developing unreasonable confidence. Your stomach notices the situation immediately. You are hungry. Unfortunately, hunger here rarely receives exciting news. Poor families in medieval cities eat to continue existing, not to impress food critics from several centuries in the future. Breakfast, if the family manages one, appears modest enough to make modern brunch menus seem deeply theatrical. A heel of bread, leftover broth, thin ale, or watered drink safer than questionable street water, maybe porridge if grain stretches far enough. And before you judge too quickly, medieval people often drank weak ale or small beer because fermentation sometimes made liquids safer than contaminated water sources. A mainstream historical fact slips quietly onto the table beside your disappointment. Urban sanitation remained unreliable in many medieval cities, so low alcohol drinks occasionally became everyday staples for adults and children alike. No one is partying at sunrise, by the way. This drink tastes less like celebration and more like, please do not die of stomach problems. You nibble stale bread. Actually, nibble sounds optimistic. You gnaw. The loaf could reasonably defend itself. Still, bread matters. Bread becomes the backbone of survival. Rich households eat fine white loaves. Poor families usually settle for darker bread made from rye, barley, oats, or mixed grains, rougher and denser than anything modern cafes describe lovingly as rustic. Rustic today means expensive. Rustic here means survival. You leave the cramped room and follow the family toward the market where every coin suddenly carries dramatic emotional weight. Streets bustle with sellers arranging vegetables, scraps of fish, cheap cuts of meat, onions, turnips, beans, and enough cabbage to make you suspect medieval Europe quietly entered a committed relationship with cabbage centuries ago. Nobody strolls casually. People calculate. Can today's wages buy flour? Could yesterday's bread last another meal? Will soup stretch if enough water joins the negotiation? A mother pauses before vegetables, touches each carefully, bargains hard, sighs harder, and finally leaves carrying less than she hoped for. Hunger sharpens mathematics. You begin noticing how meals rely on stretching ingredients, stretching expectations, stretching hope. Broth becomes dinner, tomorrow's breakfast, and possibly lunch if enough onions volunteer cooperation. Soup thickens with scraps, vegetables, grain, stale bread, herbs, bones if fortune visits. Pottage, a thick stew common across medieval households, quietly becomes one of history's great survival foods. Everything goes into the pot, everything. You glance nervously into dinner and decide curiosity feels dangerous. Still, there is comfort here. Steam curls upward, warmth gathers around the fire. Even thin meals feel meaningful when labor waits outside. A quirky little tidbit wanders into the kitchen beside you. Historians have found references suggesting poorer families sometimes flavored food with herbs gathered locally or scavenged cheaply, not because meals were exciting, but because flavor helped disguise age, blandness, or outright disappointment. Imagine proudly whispering, "Tonight's soup features rosemary," while privately admitting the real ingredient remains desperation. And yet, sometimes fortune surprises. A market seller lowers prices near closing time. Someone shares leftovers. Bread too stale for merchants still fills hungry stomachs. The family remembers a baker who occasionally saves scraps for familiar faces. Relationships feed people as much as coins do. You stand near a stall, watching customers bargain with impressive seriousness over onions and cabbage. Suddenly, modern grocery shopping feels embarrassingly dramatic. You once sighed because avocados seemed expensive. Here, people argue softly over bread thickness. Perspective arrives quickly. The father of the household picks up temporary work carrying sacks near warehouses and returns with a few coins and sore shoulders. The mother quietly calculates meals in silence. You can almost hear arithmetic happening. 2 loaves, some onions, bit of grain, maybe broth tomorrow. Definitely worry. Children help too, because childhood in poverty carries fewer afternoons and more responsibilities. A girl carries scraps home. A boy delivers messages for shopkeepers and earns enough for soup if lucky. Nobody wastes food, crumbs disappear, fat gets reused, bones boil twice, sometimes 3 times. If mold appears, Section 4. Night settles over the city with all the enthusiasm of a damp blanket. You discover very quickly that medieval cold behaves less like weather and more like a personal grudge. The room darkens early, shadows gathering across rough wooden walls, while smoke curls lazily toward beams overhead. Outside, wind slips between crowded buildings and whistles through cracks as if checking whether anyone inside has accidentally become comfortable. Nobody has. The family begins preparing for evening long before true darkness arrives, because warmth here requires planning, compromise, and a level of emotional resilience modern heating systems have completely ruined. You miss radiators immediately, you miss insulation, you miss the reckless confidence of walking barefoot indoors while pretending temperature is somebody else's problem. Instead, you sit near a hearth barely strong enough to win an argument against winter. The fire crackles softly, precious and carefully watched. Fuel costs effort. Wood must be bought, scavenged, traded, or rationed. Charcoal exists if somebody has money. Most poor households count every piece like treasure. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the fading embers. Fuel shortages posed genuine hardship for poorer medieval city residents, especially during winter. In many towns, access to firewood could become expensive or restricted, forcing families to ration heat carefully and sometimes burn cheaper materials when wood proves scarce. Meaning tonight's heating plan occasionally resembles optimism plus stubbornness. You notice how everyone dresses for bed, or rather how nobody truly undresses. Layers stay on, tunics remain, cloaks become blankets, socks, if fortune smiles, suddenly qualify as emotional support. Sleep here is not glamorous. You remember that cramped room from yesterday, the one where privacy quietly resigned and fled the century, and now it transforms into something even stranger, a shared survival machine. Bodies generate warmth, that becomes strategy. Children sleep near parents. Grandparents settle closest to leftover heat. Blankets overlap like negotiations. You shift sideways because somebody else already occupies the warm spot. It feels crowded. It also works. Poor families often sleep together partly because closeness traps warmth during brutal cold. Romantic ideas of everyone peacefully tucked beneath separate cozy blankets dissolve immediately under medieval economics. Luxury sleeps elsewhere. You pull your cloak tighter and notice little tricks hidden inside routine. Hot stones wrapped in cloth, occasionally warm bedding when possible. Straw gets replaced because damp straw turns miserable quickly. Cracks near doors receive scraps of fabric stuffed into them with hopeful determination. One woman next door hangs old cloth across gaps in the wall and declares proudly that winter may enter only after asking permission. Winter does not care. Still, effort matters. A quirky historical tidbit drifts into the room like smoke. In colder regions, people sometimes slept wearing caps specifically to preserve warmth overnight, because losing heat through uncovered heads felt especially cruel when fireplaces weakened before dawn. Imagine going to bed dressed like somebody preparing for a deeply disappointing expedition. Honestly, not the worst idea. You are cold enough to consider fashionable surrender. Outside, frost gathers quietly. Wind pushes through alleyways carrying distant sounds. Dogs barking, somebody arguing dramatically, somewhere a cart stubbornly refusing to cooperate. Inside, the family huddles near fading firelight while supper settles uneasily in stomachs. That watery pottage from earlier suddenly feels valuable, warmth traveling briefly through tired limbs. Food and heat work together here. Soup warms, bread fills, blankets fail heroically. You glance toward the door and imagine sleeping outside. Immediate rejection, absolutely not. Suddenly the smoky, crowded room feels luxurious by comparison. Funny how standards change. Yesterday you questioned the straw bedding. Tonight you whisper affectionate apologies to it. Someone shifts beside you and mutters in sleep. A child curls closer to warmth. A mother quietly checks embers one last time before settling near younger children. Nobody wastes movement. Nobody wastes heat. Even breathing seems economical, yet hardship never fully chases away humor. A father jokes softly that winter strengthens character. His wife immediately replies that character can sleep near the cold wall then. Tiny laughter rises through the room. Exhausted laughter, the kind built from repetition. You notice something else too. Poor families survive cold not simply through supplies, but through habits. Shared sleeping, layered clothing, timed meals, borrowed warmth, neighborly exchanges, need extra blankets, trade labor, need fuel, borrow and promise repayment, need brought. Section 5. Morning arrives carrying damp air, sore muscles, and the uncomfortable certainty that nobody in this household can afford a lazy day. The fire has nearly surrendered overnight. Ash glows faintly while somebody pokes at it with the weary optimism of a person negotiating with disappointment. Around you, blankets, if such ambitious terminology still applies, get folded away, cloaks shaken out, shoes tugged back on. No one lingers dramatically in bed. There is no 5 more minutes. There is mostly, if we do not earn money, supper becomes theoretical. You step outside into narrow streets already alive with movement. Rainwater mixes with mud, straw, and suspicious puddles that absolutely do not improve under inspection. Somewhere nearby, somebody loudly advertises fish in a voice suggesting fish itself may not entirely agree with the arrangement. Markets are beginning again, because survival in a medieval city often depends on chasing tiny opportunities before somebody else grabs them first. Poor families rarely survive on one dependable income. That sounds modern somehow, doesn't it? Except instead of side hustles involving motivational podcasts, today's version includes hauling sacks, cleaning workshops, carrying messages, mending clothes, selling scraps, or trying desperately to convince strangers that yes, you absolutely know how to sharpen knives despite learning roughly 10 minutes ago. You trail alongside the father from the household while he scans the square for temporary labor. Men gather near merchants, warehouses, docks depending on the city, or workshops where masters occasionally need extra hands. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the noise of bargaining. Many medieval urban laborers worked irregular jobs, earning daily wages without long-term stability. Porters, apprentices, servants, builders, street sellers, and casual workers often depended on temporary employment, leaving poor families vulnerable whenever illness, weather, or bad luck interrupted income. Today looks uncertain, which unfortunately looks normal. A merchant waves for laborers to unload barrels. 6 men move immediately, 2 get chosen. 4 pretend disappointment feels familiar. Nearby, women arrange baskets of cloth scraps, herbs, bread, candles, old tools, repaired clothing, anything capable of becoming coins. One woman sells onions while somehow simultaneously arguing, gossiping, and disciplining 3 children. Honestly impressive. You begin noticing something quietly exhausting. Everyone multitasks because survival rewards efficiency. Carry water while watching children, patch clothes while heating broth, deliver messages while collecting scraps. Nothing happens separately. Even conversations feel productive. A neighbor speaks while mending sleeves. A baker negotiates prices while scolding somebody for touching bread too enthusiastically. You pass a boy no older than 10 running errands with terrifying seriousness. Childhood here feels strangely brief. A missed opportunity means missed food. The family's eldest daughter spends mornings helping at a market stall, earning scraps and tiny coins. Her hands already move quickly, eyes sharp for customers who might wander away without paying. Nobody romanticizes work. Nobody says, follow your dreams. Dreams currently cost money. Still, tiny jobs appear everywhere. Desperation sharpens imagination enough. A man sharpens knives roadside. Someone rents out wheelbarrows. A widow repairs torn gloves. Children carry messages. Others gather dropped firewood, scraps of cloth, or leftover vegetables abandoned after markets close. Nothing gets wasted. You remember yesterday's stale bread and suddenly realize the city quietly runs on leftovers. A quirky historical tidbit slips through the crowd beside you. Some medieval cities employed official bell ringers or criers who announce news, regulations, missing property, or public warnings aloud because literacy remained uneven. Imagine your neighborhood updates delivered dramatically by someone shouting in the square. Lost goat! Tax changes. Stop throwing garbage in the alley. Honestly, some things improve surprisingly little. You pause near beggars clustered outside a church wall, and here survival becomes harder to look at. Not everyone finds work, not everyone has family support. Poor urban life balances on frighteningly narrow edges. One injury, one fever, one failed season. Suddenly begging enters the conversation. Charity matters here, unevenly but sincerely. Religious institutions sometimes distribute bread or aid. Wealthier citizens occasionally give alms, partly kindness, partly duty, partly fear of divine disappointment. A mother nearby exchanges patched cloth for onions. Another trades labor cleaning a stall instead of paying coin. Money matters, but favors matter too. You slowly understand the invisible economy underneath everything. I helped yay. Section 6. Before sunrise properly remembers its job, somebody is already awake. You hear movement in the dark, the scrape of a bucket, a whispered reminder, quiet footsteps trying and failing to avoid creaky floorboards. Outside, the city still yawns beneath gray sky, but inside this cramped room, childhood has officially ended several hours early. Not dramatically, not cruelly in the way stories sometimes whisper, just practically, because poor families survive together, and survival asks everyone to contribute, even the very small people who should, by modern standards, still be sleeping through cartoons. A sleepy child beside you rubs tired eyes while pulling on oversized clothes handed down through siblings like treasured historical artifacts. Sleeves droop, shoes complain, hair loses an argument against gravity. Breakfast, if breakfast feels ambitious enough to exist today, comes quickly and quietly. Bread softened in broth, yesterday's scraps pretending convincingly to be enough. Nobody lingers, work waits. You follow the family's children out into the waking city where mist clings to alleyways and chimney smoke rises into pale air. Markets remain quiet for now, though shopkeepers already arrange goods with suspicious seriousness. The oldest daughter heads toward a baker's stall. Her task sounds simple: carry flour, sweep floors, deliver loaves. Try not to drop anything expensive. Try especially not to anger the baker. The baker naturally possesses the emotional warmth of damp stone before sunrise. You quickly learn something important. Poor children in medieval cities often work because family economies depend on every possible contribution. A mainstream historical fact settles beside you as footsteps echo through narrow streets. Urban children commonly helped in workshops, markets, domestic service, street selling, apprenticeships, or family trades, especially among poorer households where survival left little room for idle afternoons. Childhood exists. It just multitasks. One boy runs messages between merchants. Another gathers scraps fallen from carts. Girls help sew, wash, carry water, clean homes, or assist market sellers. Nobody asks whether they feel inspired. Nobody hands out motivational speeches. Mostly adults say things like, "Move faster. Don't spill that. Where are the onions?" A younger boy trots beside you carrying baskets almost as large as his patience. He moves carefully because dropping supplies means wasted food, wasted effort, and possibly dramatic disappointment from every adult in his immediate future. You imagine offering encouragement. "You're doing great, buddy." He stares briefly, then continues walking because compliments unfortunately do not buy supper. Still, life contains strange little moments of play. Children remain children even inside hardship. Between errands, a pair of boys kick scraps through muddy streets, pretending they are warriors. A girl sings softly while scrubbing bowls. Someone invents games involving pebbles, sticks, or absolutely nothing. Joy sneaks through cracks. Tiny, temporary, persistent, a quirky little historical tidbit wanders beside you while children dart between market stalls. Archaeologists have uncovered medieval toys made from wood, clay, fabric, and bone. Tiny dolls, whistles, spinning tops, carved animals, even miniature swords, because apparently humanity collectively decided children pretending to fight dragons feels timeless. You imagine medieval parents sighing, yes, slay imaginary monsters, but after that, carry water. Some children dream bigger. Apprenticeships hover in conversation like distant treasure. Maybe one day you work for a blacksmith, a tailor, a cooper making barrels, a baker if you enjoy permanent exhaustion and flour-related arguments. Apprenticeships offer possibility, though usually after years of labor and luck. For poor families, a child entering skilled work can transform household survival. Until then, everyone helps however they can. You trail behind the eldest daughter as she delivers bread through cold lanes. She memorizes rotes with astonishing confidence. Customers rarely smile. Some count coins twice. She works quietly, efficiently, too efficiently for someone still young. And yet, there are moments of warmth. The baker tosses her stale crusts at closing. A neighbor shares broth. Someone pats her shoulder and asks after her family. Neighborhood memory matters. People know which families struggle, who lost work, who needs help, who quietly pretends everything is fine. Historians still argue whether medieval childhood among poorer classes should be understood mainly through hardship, or whether modern people sometimes underestimate affection, resilience, and social belonging in working communities. Some scholars emphasize brutal labor and vulnerability. Others point toward family bonds, play, apprenticeships, and meaningful party.
The city smells different when sickness arrives. Not dramatically at first, nothing theatrical, just small shifts. A sharper odor drifting from alleyways where waste gathers too long. Doors staying closed later than usual. Whispered voices, Somebody coughing behind thin walls while neighbors suddenly remember very urgent reasons not to visit. You notice it in the room before breakfast. A child beside the fire coughs into a sleeve and earns worried glances disguised as ordinary concern. Nobody panics immediately, because if poor families panicked every time somebody coughed, nobody would ever accomplish anything. Life continues. Bread still needs earning, water still needs carrying. Rent still waits with medieval patience and absolutely no sympathy. Yet illness lingers close in city life, hovering around cramped rooms, narrow alleys, smoky homes, questionable water, and bodies pressed too tightly together. You step outside carrying a bucket and suddenly become aware of how crowded everything feels again. Streets that yesterday seemed noisy and busy now feel oddly fragile. People brush shoulders constantly. Children run past. Animals wander where they absolutely should not. Someone empties something deeply suspicious into the road and pretends not to notice your expression. You immediately stop asking questions. A mainstream historical fact settles beside you while muddy streets swallow footsteps. Sanitation in many medieval cities remained inconsistent and poor by modern standards. Waste disposal varied enormously, drainage often failed, and overcrowding helped illness spread quickly, especially among poorer urban populations living in close quarters. Which is a scholarly way of saying everybody is much too close to everybody else. You duck into a lane where laundry hangs overhead like surrender flags and notice neighbors exchanging worried gossip. "Fever," someone mutters. "Bad cough." Could be winter chill. Could be punishment. Could be Thomas again somehow. Poor Thomas receives blame for surprisingly many things. Inside cramped homes, illness rearranges priorities fast. Work stops if somebody becomes too weak to move. Food gets redirected toward recovery when possible. Children suddenly carry extra responsibilities. Neighbors occasionally help or quietly avoid the household altogether depending on fear, generosity, and personality. You return to the family's room where the coughing child now sits wrapped near the fire, pale and sleepy. The mother feels a forehead. The father stares at coins. Because sickness costs, always, lost wages, extra food if available, medicine if anybody can afford medicine, and medieval medicine you are about to discover occasionally feels alarmingly experimental. Someone nearby recommends herbs, someone else recommends prayer. Another insists onions cure practically everything except bad moods and taxes. A grandmother mutters confidently about broth, warm cloth, and rest. Honestly, grandmother currently seems the most convincing professional in the room. A quirky historical tidbit slips softly beside the hearth. Medieval households often relied on herb gardens, market remedies, and folk knowledge for everyday illness. Rosemary, sage, mint, garlic, honey, vinegar, these drifted through home treatment traditions with surprising confidence. Whether effective or symbolic sometimes remains delightfully unclear. Garlic apparently spends centuries aggressively volunteering for every medical emergency. Cold? Garlic. Bad air? Garlic. Existential dread? Probably garlic. You imagine medieval advertising. Have you tried rubbing herbs on it? Meanwhile, the room grows warmer, quieter. Work still happens because survival refuses pauses, but concern hums beneath every movement. A daughter fetches water, someone saves softer bread for the child. Soup gets stretched thinner, so portions shift around. No one announces sacrifice dramatically, they simply do it. The mother misses market hours, the father works longer. An older sibling quietly gives up extra food. Poverty sharpens care into action. Outside, rumors bloom faster than weeds. Someone whispers about fevers in another district. Someone swears foul air causes illness. Another blames spirits, weather, bad luck, or moral failure with suspicious confidence. Historians still argue whether medieval urban populations understood illness more practically than stereotypes suggest, or remained mostly trapped by superstition and limited medical frameworks. Certainly, belief mattered. Ideas about humors, balance, bad air, divine punishment But people also observe symptoms, isolation, diet, warmth, and caregiving in surprisingly practical ways. Meaning history becomes inconvenient again. People misunderstand things, people also adapt. Both happen together. You pass a barber surgeon near market stalls and quietly reconsider all your life choices. The man sharpens to, morning arrives carrying gossip before sunlight fully commits. You do not even step outside before hearing it. A whispered argument near the doorway, someone downstairs insisting a neighbor watered soup too much and called it generosity. Someone else muttering about borrowed firewood that mysteriously never returned. The city wakes noisy, smoky, hungry, and deeply interested in everyone else's business. Because when families survive crowded together, privacy becomes less a reality and more a medieval fantasy alongside dragons and affordable rent. You push open the door and step into an alley already alive with motion. Laundry hangs overhead like damp flags. Buckets scrape stone. Doors creak open. Somewhere, a woman loudly accuses someone of stealing cabbage, and somehow 5 witnesses appear instantly. Nobody misses neighborhood drama, especially when entertainment costs nothing. Still, beneath the gossip lies something surprisingly important. Poor families survive because neighbors matter. Not always kindly, not always consistently, but undeniably. A mainstream historical fact settles beside your footsteps through narrow lanes. Medieval urban communities often relied heavily on informal neighborhood support networks, parish connections, and shared labor, particularly among poorer residents. Families borrowed tools, traded food, watched children, exchanged labor, and depended on local relationships during illness or hardship. Which sounds comforting until you realize neighbors also remember absolutely everything. Miss rent? Known immediately. Burn supper? Discussed publicly. Argue too loudly. Congratulations, you are now community theater. You stop near a communal water source where people line up carrying buckets and opinions. Mostly opinions. Water gathering doubles as information exchange. Who found work? Who lost work? Whose cousin arrived unexpectedly? Whose husband tried to fix shoes and somehow ruined both shoes and family morale? The family you've been following moves through this world carefully. A mother pauses to borrow thread from one neighbor, promises repayment after market day, then quietly offers broth to another household still recovering from sickness. Debt here rarely looks official. No contracts, no signatures, just memory. And memory, unfortunately, works alarmingly well. You owe me onions. I watched your children last winter. You still have my cooking pot. Entire economies wobble gently atop favors. You begin noticing how survival spreads sideways through relationships. One woman cannot afford bread today. A neighbor shares half a loaf. Tomorrow, perhaps the favor reverses. Another family needs someone to watch children while parents work. Done. Someone falls ill. Soup appears. Eventually. Usually. Depending on personality and previous arguments, because kindness exists here, but so does pettiness. Magnificent pettiness. A neighbor hands over broth while casually mentioning 3 unpaid favors from 6 months ago. Generosity arrives with receipts. A quirky historical tidbit wanders beside you while voices bounce across the alley. In some medieval communities, neighbors reportedly gathered for shared baking using communal ovens, especially where private ovens proved impractical or expensive. Bread making became social, practical, and occasionally dramatic when arguments erupted over timing, fuel, or mysteriously shrinking dough. Honestly, human beings arguing about oven schedules feels eternal. You imagine somebody shouting, "Margaret, your bread has occupied oven space for 40 minutes." Meanwhile, Margaret pretends not to hear. Children dart through alleys chasing one another while adults negotiate chores and gossip. Yesterday's worries about illness soften slightly, though cautious glances remain. Someone sends herbs over. Another checks quietly whether the coughing child improved. The walls between families feel thin, emotionally and literally. You realize overcrowding changes relationships. Nobody disappears into separate rooms. Nobody retreats elegantly into solitude. If you are sad, people know. Hungry, people know. Embarrassed, unfortunately, everybody knows. Sometimes this closeness comforts, sometimes it suffocates. You sit near a doorway while older women repair clothes together, hands moving quickly. Conversation drifts, food prices, marriage rumors, taxes, a neighbor's suspiciously loud goat. Then suddenly somebody laughs so hard they nearly lose a needle. Even hardship leaves room for absurdity. You think again about those cramped sleeping arrangements, shared fires, stretched soup, children carrying burdens too early. Somehow community becomes the invisible blanket covering what poverty cannot solve. Not perfect protection. Enough to continue. A father from next door returns empty-handed after failing to secure work. Nobody announces sympathy dramatically, and see, you learn something uncomfortable about medieval cities after sunset. Darkness changes everything. Daytime noise fades, market shouting disappears, smoke settles low between buildings, and suddenly the same streets that felt crowded and inconvenient begin feeling uncertain in ways your modern brain does not appreciate. Because nighttime here arrives without streetlights, without glowing shop signs, without the comforting illusion that emergency services exist around the corner. You step outside just after dusk and immediately understand why people move faster. Doors close earlier, voices lower. Families hurry home clutching baskets, scraps of food, or whatever tiny victories the day surrendered. The city narrows, shadows stretch strangely between crooked buildings, while lanterns flicker weakly behind windows. And somewhere nearby, somebody definitely sounds like they are losing an argument with gravity. You instinctively reach for your phone flashlight. Ah yes, right. Several centuries too early. A mainstream historical fact settles into the cooling evening air beside you. Medieval cities faced constant risks from both crime and accidental fire, especially in crowded poorer districts built largely from timber, straw, and closely packed structures. Narrow streets, dense housing, and open flames turned entire neighborhoods frighteningly vulnerable. Which feels less reassuring once you notice everyone casually carrying candles near wooden walls. Excellent. What could possibly go wrong? The answer, unfortunately, is quite a lot. You follow the family back through cramped lanes while doors bolt one after another. People know darkness invites trouble. Petty theft happens, fights happen, drunken decisions happen. Occasionally, all three at once. Coins disappear, food vanishes. Shoes, valuable, precious shoes, sometimes wander mysteriously away if left unattended. Suddenly, you understand why everyone guards possessions with near paranoid care. The father quietly checks the door twice before bed. The mother counts supplies. Children get reminded sternly not to wander. Nobody says the word danger dramatically. Nobody needs to. Outside, footsteps echo oddly in alleyways. A man passes muttering to himself. Another hurries somewhere carrying firewood like it personally insulted him. The city feels restless, and then there is fire. Fire terrifies everybody, for very practical reasons. You glance around the cramped room and finally see the problem clearly. Timber walls, cloth blankets, straw bedding, open flame. It is less a home and more a nervous agreement with physics. Poor neighborhoods especially face danger because houses crowd together so tightly. One spark escapes, one chimney misbehaves, one overturned candle enters an ambitious mood, and suddenly entire streets panic. People know this, families sleep lightly, buckets stay nearby when possible, neighbors watch. You overhear stories told quietly near the hearth. Someone remembers a warehouse blaze, another swears half a street burned years ago. Nobody laughs, fire stories travel like warnings. A quirky little tidbit slips softly beside the firelight. In some medieval towns, night watchmen or patrols walked streets calling hours, warning of fire, checking gates, or simply reminding people somebody technically remained awake and responsible. Imagine hearing someone wander outside shouting warnings into darkness. 10 o'clock, cold night, Please stop accidentally burning the neighborhood. Honestly, comforting, slightly dramatic, but comforting. You sit near the hearth while older neighbors discuss locking doors and suspicious strangers with startling seriousness. A woman insists thieves target careless households. Another claims cats notice danger first. Nobody questions this. The cat currently sleeping nearby contributes absolutely nothing but confidence. Still, fear spreads unevenly. Poor families cannot always protect themselves well. Locks cost money, solid doors cost money. Replacing stolen goods costs very serious money. Lose food, problem. Lose shoes, larger problem. Lose tools, potential disaster. The invisible math of poverty sharpens danger. Every object matters because replacing anything hurts. Outside, arguments occasionally burst into life without warning. Raised voices drift through thin walls. Someone accuses someone else of stealing wood. Someone else denies it passionately. A third neighbor immediately develops opinions. Naturally, crowded living means conflict multiplies easily. So does rumor. Did you hear about the alley robbery? Someone's cousin got cheated. A merchant vanished. Thomas still somehow involved. Poor Thomas remains suspiciously connected to every catastrophe. Historians still argue whether medieval urban crime was truly more common than later imagination suggests, or simply more visible in dense communities where everyone witnessed. Section 10. Morning returns gently after a night that, rather impressively, ends without robbery, disaster, or the entire neighborhood catching fire. By medieval standards, optimism briefly visits. Cold air slips into the room while somebody stirs embers back to life with the determined expression of a person emotionally exhausted by weather. Outside, bells begin sounding through the city, low and familiar, drifting across rooftops and narrow lanes like reminders that time belongs to everyone, rich and poor alike. You notice people move differently today, not slower exactly, lighter, a little less bent beneath invisible worry. Because feast days, holy days, and moments of gathering matter here in ways your modern calendar occasionally forgets. Poor families still struggle. Soup remains suspiciously thin. Rent still lurks nearby like an unwelcome relative. But every so often, life loosens its grip for an afternoon. You follow the family into the streets where bells continue ringing, calling people toward worship, trade pauses, and something almost resembling rest. Almost. Nobody here suddenly becomes carefree. A mother still worries about food. A father still calculates tomorrow's work. Children still carry buckets. Yet today carries softness around the edges. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the ringing bells. Religious life shaped everyday medieval urban existence deeply, especially for poorer communities. Churches marked time, organized festivals, offered charity, hosted gatherings, and created shared rhythms through feast days and public rituals that structured ordinary life. Meaning, even if life feels difficult, and it usually does, there are still moments where everybody collectively agrees to stop and breathe for a second, or at least breathe while standing somewhere cold. You drift toward a church square filling steadily with people, old cloaks brushed clean, children scrubbed to relative acceptability, neighbors greeting one another while absolutely pretending they were not gossiping aggressively yesterday. Candles flicker softly inside stone walls, voices hush, smoke from incense curls upward, gentler somehow than the household smoke clinging permanently to your clothes. You notice something comforting here. Nobody looks wealthy, or rather, wealth matters less for a little while. Laborers stand beside merchants, widows beside apprentices, hungry families beside slightly less hungry families. For a brief moment, everybody shares the same silence. You sit quietly while prayers murmur around you and realize faith offers something beyond religion alone. Routine, community, meaning, a place to gather when homes feel cramped and life feels unfair. Outside again, the city brightens. Food stalls appear near gathering places. Musicians occasionally arrive, hopeful and dramatic. Children suddenly remember laughter exists. A boy kicks at mud, pretending it is an invading army. Someone sells sweet cakes expensive enough to inspire emotional conflict. Do you buy bread for survival or tiny joy for morale? The eternal question. A quirky historical tidbit wanders into the square beside you. Medieval festivals sometimes included games, music, storytelling, juggling, mock performances, or peculiar local customs that varied wildly from town to town. Certain celebrations even involved symbolic reversals, where ordinary people briefly mocked authority or leaned joyfully into absurdity. Human beings apparently never stop inventing weird community traditions. You imagine someone announcing, "Good news everyone, today we celebrate by dancing badly and pretending responsibility temporarily resigned." Honestly? Tempting. Children chase one another between stalls, someone laughs too loudly, a woman shares gossip disguised as concern. Men argue about work prospects while eating something fried enough to feel miraculous. Even poor families carve tiny spaces for happiness, not luxury, not abundance, moments. Someone sings, someone tells stories near the market. Someone saves a coin for warm food because morale deserves investment too. You remember those cramped nights beside smoky embers and realize joy feels strangely practical here, necessary even. Without laughter, what exactly survives besides exhaustion? The family pauses near vendors where cheap treats tempt impossible budgets. A mother hesitates, counts coins, sighs, then buys something tiny anyway, shared between children. Immediate celebration, tiny bites, giggles, gone in seconds. Worth it. Historians still argue whether medieval religious festivals genuinely relieved hardship for poorer populations or functioned more as temporary distractions that reinforce social hierarchy and endurance. Some scholars emphasize joy, solidarity, communal belonging, and emotional release. Others point toward limits, brief pauses before returning to difficult labor and inequality. Standing here watching Tyr, Lal morning arrives carrying ordinary worries again. The feast day softness fades quickly, like warmth escaping through cracks in the wall. Someone wakes before dawn. Someone sighs over dwindling flour. Someone quietly counts coins and immediately looks more tired afterward. The city resumes its familiar rhythm: mud, smoke, bargaining, worry. And somewhere near the fire, before anyone else fully wakes, one person already begins solving problems nobody else has even noticed yet. Usually very quietly, usually without applause. You begin noticing how much survival rests on the shoulders of women inside poor medieval households. Not in grand speeches, not dramatic declarations. In invisible labor, constant labor, the sort that quietly keeps everything from collapsing. A mother rises first, checking embers with sleepy determination. Fire means warmth. Warmth means breakfast. Breakfast, however disappointing, means people work. No fire, bad morning. She folds blankets, shakes straw bedding, saves scraps, counts food, patches sleeves, wakes children, settles arguments, remembers debts, remembers favors, remembers whose shoes are nearly destroyed and whose cough still sounds worrying. Honestly, if medieval cities ever function at all, exhaustion deserves partial credit. A mainstream historical fact settles softly beside the smoky room. Women in poorer medieval households often contributed substantially to family survival through paid and unpaid labor, selling goods, brewing ale, laundering, spinning, sewing, domestic service, market work, childcare, food preparation, and household management. Meaning survival itself becomes logistics, complicated logistics, without notebooks, without calendars, without coffee. Frankly, heroic. You follow the mother through narrow streets as morning gathers strength. She walks fast because every task competes with another. First market, then borrowed thread, then food, then perhaps washing work if luck cooperates, then somehow supper, and children, and repairs, and neighbors, and sleep, theoretically. You briefly consider lying down in surrender. She clearly cannot. At the market, bargaining becomes performance art. A cabbage inspected like royal treasure. Bread weighed suspiciously. Coins counted twice. Prices argued with impressive stamina. One woman beside you debates onion quality with such intensity you half expect legal intervention. Nobody wastes money. Nobody wastes cloth. Nobody wastes chances. You notice something quietly impressive. Women stretch impossible budgets into survivable days. Yesterday's broth becomes today's base. Torn sleeves become mended clothing. Stale bread becomes thickened soup. Nothing disappears. Everything transforms. You remember that soup from earlier? The one repeatedly pretending optimism counts as seasoning, and suddenly realize someone constantly performs tiny miracles behind the scenes. A quirky historical tidbit drifts beside you while laundry slaps against wooden tubs. In some medieval towns, women brewed ale at home for household use or small local sale, and alewives sometimes became familiar neighborhood figures. Brewing, surprisingly, often belonged partly to domestic labor, before commercial shifts gradually changed the trade. Imagine adding accidental neighborhood beverage manager to your already impossible workload. Meanwhile, laundry unfolds nearby with the emotional energy of revenge. Water hauled, clothes beaten, soap limited, cold air thoroughly unhelpful. You once complained about folding laundry. History quietly judges you. Children swirl around these routines too. One daughter helps patch clothing. Another watches younger siblings while vegetables simmer reluctantly near the hearth. Skills pass quietly between generations. Sewing, stretching meals, managing shortages, negotiating neighbors. Survival becomes education. Nobody announces lessons. Life teaches aggressively enough. Back indoors, the room becomes workshop, kitchen, nursery, and repair station simultaneously. Torn shoes examined, sleeves stitched, soup planned. Bills, well, not bills exactly, but responsibilities hover invisibly overhead. You overhear a quiet arithmetic again. If bread waits another day, if thread lasts, if market prices stay steady, if illness does not return. So many ifs, too many ifs, yet somehow routines continue. Historians still argue whether women's labor in poorer medieval urban households has been underestimated in traditional histories, or whether records simply struggle to capture work happening informally inside homes and markets. Some scholars argue survival depended profoundly on invisible domestic economies, often overlooked beside guilds, kings, and wars. Standing here near steaming wash water and patched sleeves, you suspect invisibility tells its own story. Nobody writes songs about stretching soup. Nobody paints grand portraits of fixing socks.
The city feels sharper when winter settles in properly, not colder at first. Sharper, as if the air itself suddenly develops opinions. You wake before sunrise and immediately know something has changed because nobody in the room wants to leave the blankets. The fire looks tired. The floor feels offended by your feet. Breath hangs faintly in the air like tiny surrender flags. Outside, wind squeezes through narrow streets with determined cruelty. Inside, silence stretches longer than usual. Winter means trouble. Not dramatic trouble every day, slow trouble, careful trouble, the kind that counts coins with trembling fingers and quietly wonders whether food lasts until spring. You sit near the hearth while somebody stirs weak embers back toward life. Yesterday's warmth feels distant already. Cloaks tighten, shoulders hunch. Children wake slower, smaller somehow beneath layers. And suddenly everything costs more effort. Walking, working, sleeping, smiling, honestly. A mainstream historical fact settles beside the smoky cold. Winter often placed enormous pressure on medieval urban poor because food prices could rise. Seasonal work sometimes declined, illness spread more easily, and fuel shortages made heating increasingly difficult, meaning survival becomes arithmetic under unpleasant conditions. Bread versus firewood, soup versus rent, warmth versus tomorrow. No choice feels good. The market reflects this immediately. You step outside into streets streaked with frost and muddy ice, where people move quickly, heads lowered against bitter wind. Vendors wrap hands in cloth. Faces look pinched. Conversations shorten. Nobody lingers to gossip quite as enthusiastically. Cold steals patience. Food stalls seem smaller somehow, or maybe hunger grows larger. Vegetables thin out. Good grain costs more. Meat becomes fantasy unless luck intervenes. The mother pauses before flour, sighs, counts coins, sighs again. That sigh deserves historical preservation, the sound of impossible decisions. You remember those thin meals from earlier and realize winter sharpens every weakness already hiding inside poverty. Soup grows thinner, bread harder, portions quieter. Nobody says they are hungry immediately. People pretend, adults especially. A parent eats slower, claims fullness sooner, leaves scraps for later. Children rarely believe this. Still, pretending counts. A quirky little historical tidbit wanders through cold market air beside you. Some medieval households reportedly mix cheaper grains or fillers into bread during difficult seasons. Barley, oats, rye, peas, even less desirable ingredients when shortages deepened. Medieval survival occasionally resembled culinary improvisation conducted under emotional pressure. You stare suspiciously at a loaf and briefly wonder what exactly negotiated its way inside. Best not ask. Back indoors, routines tighten. Nothing wasted, absolutely nothing. Ash saved, scraps reused, bones boiled again, blankets layered, doors blocked against drafts with cloth that long ago surrendered elegance. You remember those herbs stuffed around sleeping spaces and almost laugh quietly. Mint against fleas, rosemary against smells, optimism against winter. The room smells smoky, damp, humid, strangely comforting now, which worries you slightly. The city is changing your standards again. You once expected central heating, now you emotionally support warm soup. Historians still argue whether medieval famine and winter hardship struck urban populations as relentlessly as older stories claim, or whether communities developed stronger coping systems than we sometimes imagine. Evidence suggests both recurring vulnerability and remarkable adaptation. Charity, neighborhood exchanges, seasonal planning, communal aid, and creative rationing. Creative rationing, a polite scholarly phrase meaning everyone becomes alarmingly talented at making almost nothing look temporarily sufficient. Neighbors knock more often in winter, not always cheerfully, borrowing fuel, trading food, checking illness, complaining dramatically about weather as though cold personally insulted them. One woman arrives carrying onions, leaves with thread, another swaps labor for broth. Somebody shares stale bread because tomorrow perhaps kindness reverses direction. Community tightens when resources shrink, not perfectly. Tension grows too. Arguments over fuel, food, noise, shared space. Margaret naturally still monopolizes oven time. Certain traditions survive everything. Children feel winter differently. Less play, more chores. Carry fuel, fetch water with freezing fingers. Stay close indoors when weather turns cruel. Still, somehow, laughter appears. A boy slides accidentally through mud and declares himself a heroic knight of ice. Everybody laughs harder than expected. Cold cannot fully defeat absurdity. Evenings grow longer now. Darkness. Rumors travel faster than carts, faster than church bells, faster somehow than common sense. You notice it before breakfast. The room feels quieter, voices lowered in that careful way people speak when uncertainty sits nearby listening. Someone downstairs whispers about fever in another neighborhood. A woman in the alley swears 3 families have already fallen ill. Someone else insists it began near the market, while another claims travelers brought it. Naturally, nobody agrees on anything except anxiety. Outside, winter air hangs cold and thin between narrow streets. Smoke curls upward from chimneys while people cluster near corners, speaking softly but urgently. Even the city seems to move differently today. Faster, then slower. A strange rhythm of worry. You follow the family into the market where conversation drifts around you in nervous fragments. Bad cough. Too many funerals. Not ordinary sickness. Could be punishment. Could be bad air. Could be Thomas again. Poor Thomas survives centuries only to become medieval urban rumor. A mainstream historical fact settles quietly into the uneasy morning. Medieval people faced recurring epidemics and outbreaks. Plague among the most infamous, though far from the only illness. Urban density, trade routes, poor sanitation, crowded housing, and limited medical understanding often allowed disease to spread rapidly through towns and cities. And suddenly, everyone notices proximity. Too many bodies, too little space, too much coughing. You glance around and realize medieval cities become deeply inconvenient places to practice social distancing. One room houses families, markets pack tightly, churches gather crowds, neighbors borrow bowls, and accidentally entire illnesses. People still work because poverty rarely offers paid sick leave. Hungry families cannot simply pause survival. The father hesitates before taking labor near crowded docks. The mother debates market trips against risk. Children get warned repeatedly, wash, stay near, do not wander. Medieval hygiene instructions admittedly possess limitations. Someone nearby burns herbs and swears smoke purifies air. Another carries flowers or strong smells near the face because foul odors become suspicious. People speak anxiously of bad air drifting through streets. The idea feels strange until you remember alley smells and quietly understand why medieval people concluded air itself might be plotting against them. Honestly, reasonable guess. A quirky little historical tidbit slips beside you through nervous conversation. During plague periods and later medieval centuries, people sometimes carried herbs, flowers, spices, or fragrant bundles, believing strong smells protected them from illness or corrupted air. Rosemary, lavender, vinegar-soaked cloths, small defenses against invisible fear. History occasionally resembles everybody collectively improvising. You pass neighbors standing awkwardly farther apart than usual. Not far. Medieval farther, which means roughly 3 worried feet. Doors close earlier. Windows open despite cold in some places because somebody heard fresh air helps. Someone else loudly insists opening windows invites death. Immediate argument. The city remains committed to disagreement. Inside the family's room, worry changes ordinary habits. Soup shared more carefully. Blankets watched. Coughs monitored. The recovering child from earlier receives extra attention whenever a sneeze appears. Everyone listens. Silence grows heavy around illness. You notice something sad too. Fear complicates kindness. Neighbors still help, but cautiously. A bowl left outside instead of handed over. Conversation through doors. Quick visits. Quick exits. Poverty already stretches survival thin. Sickness threatens to tear holes through everything. Miss work, less food, need medicine, expensive uncertainty, lose a family member. Life rearranges painfully, yet people continue adapting. Again, always adaptation. Historians still argue whether medieval responses to disease deserve more credit for practicality than popular imagination allows, or whether fear, superstition, and misunderstanding overwhelmed meaningful action. Certainly panic existed, blame existed, religious explanations flourished, yet communities also isolated homes, adjusted habits, cared for sick relatives, cleaned spaces, and observed patterns in surprisingly thoughtful ways. Meaning humanity behaves as humanity usually does. Half practical, half confused, entirely worried. The market shrinks earlier today. Vendors mutter about fewer customers. Rumors grow while confidence shrinks. A woman buys herbs. A man buys candles. Someone prays longer than usual. Someone laughs too loudly trying to defeat nerves. Children notice everything. Questions appear. Will we get sick? Are neighbors okay? Can illness smell us? Adults answer imperfectly. Morning arrives pale and uncertain, though the city, stubborn as ever, continues pretending survival itself counts as routine, because what else can it do? Bread still needs earning, floors still need sweeping, children still wake hungry, fear may sit quietly in the corner, but rent, metaphorical medieval rent anyway, keeps tapping its foot impatiently. You step outside into streets damp with cold and rumor, expecting worry to swallow everything whole, yet something strange happens. Life resumes, not cheerfully, not fully, but steadily. A market seller still arranges onions with emotional seriousness. A cobbler still mutters at damaged shoes as though leather personally offended him. Somewhere nearby, someone argues over cabbage prices with astonishing commitment to the art. The city survives because people keep imagining tomorrow. Even when tomorrow feels rude enough to refuse promises, you begin noticing dreams. Small dreams, quiet dreams. The kind poverty teaches people to whisper instead of announce. A mainstream historical fact settles softly beside your footsteps through muddy streets. Apprenticeships, marriage, migration, religious service, or steady trade work sometimes offered poor urban families limited paths toward greater security in medieval cities, though opportunities remained uncertain and deeply shaped by luck, status, and circumstance, meaning escape exists, technically, but mostly wearing uncomfortable shoes and complicated odds. You walk beside the eldest daughter from the household, the one delivering bread before sunrise, sleeves worn thin, hands already older than childhood deserves. She pauses near a tailor's workshop, only briefly, just long enough to glance inside. Fabric hangs neatly, workers move quickly, someone stitches beside warm light. You notice her looking, not longing dramatically, just quietly. Maybe one day, maybe apprenticeship, maybe skilled work, maybe something steadier than scrambling between errands forever. Then she keeps walking, because dreams do not pause chores. Still, they exist. A younger boy points proudly toward the dock, box and declares he will someday own a cart. A cart, not a castle, not treasure, a cart. Ambition adjusts to hunger. You strangely admire this. Someone else hopes marriage improves life. A widow quietly hopes surviving winter counts as enough future planning for now. A father talks about saving, slowly, painfully, for tools sturdy enough to secure steadier labor. Hope appears humble here. Threadbare, practical, a quirky historical tidbit wanders beside you through market noise. Medieval people occasionally carried charms, tokens, saints' badges, or small lucky objects believed to offer protection, fortune, or guidance. Whether spiritual comfort or emotional reassurance, tiny symbols traveled quietly through difficult lives. Human beings apparently love portable optimism. You imagine clutching a lucky coin while muttering, "Please let today involve fewer disasters." Reasonable. At the market, gossip softens again into ordinary dreams disguised as complaints. If prices stop rising, if work stays steady, if Thomas finally returns borrowed tools, poor Thomas remains history's most suspicious roommate. You notice something important. People dream collectively. Neighbors discuss apprenticeships for children. Families recommend opportunities. Someone hears of laundry work. Someone knows a baker needing help. Advice travels faster than certainty. Community quietly fuels possibility. Not guaranteed possibility. Fragile possibility. The mother from the household pauses with another woman discussing marriage prospects for a distant cousin. There is laughter, teasing, practical concerns, dowry worries, food worries, warmth worries. Romance unfortunately arrives carrying spreadsheets nobody invented yet. Still, people marry, people hope, people imagine rooms of their own someday, perhaps 2 rooms if optimism becomes irresponsible. Historians still argue whether medieval urban poverty trapped families in near-permanent hardship or allowed more mobility than older stereotypes suggest. Some evidence points towards cycles of labor, apprenticeship, migration, and modest advancement. Other records reveal crushing repetition where poverty lingered stubbornly across generations. Walking through these streets, you suspect truth wanders uneasily between both. Some rise slowly, some remain stuck, some get lucky, some simply survive. And survival itself already demands astonishing effort. Afternoon settles gray across rooftops while children dart between errands. You overhear laughter again near a workshop where apprentices tease one another despite cold fingers and long hours. Even tired people imagine better things. Not fantasy exactly, possibility. The father returns from work quieter than usual, rubbing sore hands while mentioning rumors of steadier labor nay. Morning arrives quietly. Not hopeful exactly, not hopeless either, just familiar. The sort of gray medieval morning that stretches over rooftops and narrow alleys as though the city itself woke up tired but agreed to continue anyway. You lie still for a moment near fading warmth, listening. Someone downstairs coughs. Someone outside drags a cart over stone with enough noise to offend the entire neighborhood. A child murmurs in sleep before somebody gently nudges them awake. The room smells of smoke, damp wool, yesterday's broth, and ordinary life. Strange, really. Weeks ago, well, centuries ago for you, technically, you might have recoiled dramatically. Now, you quietly wonder whether there is enough bread left for breakfast. The city has changed your standards again. Congratulations. You survive on soup and emotional resilience. Around you, the family moves automatically through routine. Cloaks gathered, shoes checked, embers coaxed reluctantly toward life. Someone tears bread smaller than yesterday because winter still refuses generosity. Nobody complains loudly, not because hardship disappeared, because hardship settled into rhythm. A mainstream historical fact slips softly into the room beside tired morning air. For many poor medieval urban households, daily life revolved around repeated cycles of labor, budgeting, neighborhood support, and adaptation, where survival depended less on dramatic turning points and more on enduring unstable conditions over long stretches of time, meaning life rarely transforms overnight. No sudden rescue, no mysterious benefactor arriving with warm blankets and suspiciously modern financial advice. Mostly repetition. Wake, work, stretch food, borrow help, repair clothing, sleep, repeat, and somehow, repetition becomes survival itself. You step outside into streets beginning another ordinary day. Frost lingers near corners. Smoke rises crookedly into pale sky. Market sellers prepare stalls with sleepy determination. The onion woman still argues. The cobbler still mutters. Margaret still monopolizes emotional energy near communal ovens. History reassuringly remains consistent. Children run errands with baskets nearly larger than themselves. Laborers gather waiting for work. Someone bargains aggressively over cabbage like international diplomacy depends upon it. You watch familiar faces move move through familiar struggle, a mother borrowing thread, a father chasing temporary wages, neighbors trading favors. Nothing glamorous, nothing easy, yet somehow everything continues. You remember the cramped room from earlier, the one where privacy quietly surrendered and blankets negotiated impossible responsibilities. You remember thin soup, cold nights, sickness, gossip, fear of thieves, whispered dreams near the fire. At first it all seemed unbearable, and perhaps sometimes it is, yet people adapt in ways that feel almost unsettling. A child who once cried at hunger now helps stir broth carefully. A daughter learns repairs by dim light. A neighbor who borrowed onions repays in firewood. Even laughter survives, especially laughter. You overhear somebody joking that winter must secretly hate poor people personally. Immediate agreement follows. Dark humor warms rooms surprisingly well. A quirky historical tidbit settles beside market chatter. Some medieval communities marked seasons, saints' days, or local customs with repeated traditions so familiar they help structure ordinary life, offering predictability inside uncertain worlds. Tiny rituals, bells, meals, greetings, markets, quietly reminded people life continued despite hardship. Routine comforts, even inconvenient routine. You realize poor families survive partly because ordinary repetition protects them from despair. Too busy to collapse, too tired to dramatize, too necessary to stop, work still happens. The father returns late carrying sore shoulders and a little money. Not enough. Enough. That distinction again. The mother stretches supper again. Children complete chores again. Neighbors drift in and out again. Life repeats so steadily it begins to feel almost peaceful from the outside, though everyone inside still worries quietly. Historians still argue whether medieval urban poverty should be understood mainly through suffering or resilience, whether hardship overwhelms the story or whether adaptation itself deserves greater focus. Certainly cities contained hunger, inequality, illness, danger, and relentless labor, yet they also held friendship, skill, humor, endurance, shared effort. Standing here near a smoky doorway while evening settles over crooked roofs, you quietly suspect survival itself becomes culture. People teach one another, share methods, trade stories, pass down tricks for stretching warmth, soup, patience. A grandmother teaches sewing, a father teaches bargaining, neighbors teach caution, winter teaches